So if this dialog isn't completed, then we tell the dialog context, the thing we got from here, that we are absolutely sure. Whilst they've said they've completed in that dialog, we are going to say to the framework, yeah, okay, we agree, let's get rid of this dialog. The default is very similar to this. So if we really don't really understand what's happening, the dialog hasn't responded correctly, don't really know what's going on, we're just going to assume that we're going to get rid of everything, so we can cancel all the existing dialogs. So what you would typically do in here as well is if you have some kind of quit, for example, what we're talking about with the quit thing, we would say something along the lines of, if it was a quit intent, then we could come in here and we could call the same thing here. So we'd do something like this. So we don't need this anymore. That can come out. So that will be, if we don't know what the intent is, then we're going to come in here and say that, just as a reminder. So we've got a lot of things going on here. We've made a lot of changes. We seem to have our dialogues ready. That's all set up with these things. So we're not going to expect to get very far if we do get in here for the moment. So let's see how we get on. So all the breakpoints are set. Let's come back in here. Let's just type hi in again. So we've got services are running. We've got a message. Let's just check the intent. Should be pretty low, right? Yeah. So we haven't looked at that yet. Dialog context, right? Let's come back up here actually. So the dialog context is going to be active dialog is null. So we don't have a dialog. So we're going to come in here. Right, we haven't looked at the quality of the intent yet, so we do have one, and it's going to say it's defense. So now we're going to say, okay, dialog context, begin dialog, nice questions. So name of nice questions. So what do we call that dialog? We call that dialog nice questions ID. So now we've got an error. Dialog context, dialog with an ID of nice questions was not found. Well, that's correct, right? We haven't given it that name because we called it, or I called it, ID. So let's get rid of that now. Called it that. Again, it doesn't have to match this, but it's just a kind of convention that you see a lot. So I'll stick with the convention to make it less complicated. But just to point out, this is just an ID, right? It doesn't have to be the same name. It's only to help you, and only convention to help you mentally map this to this dialog. Okay, it doesn't have to be the same name. So let's run that again. Type in hi again. Got our services, got our message. So we should still be null for the active dialog. Yep, don't have an active dialog. So we're going to continue with this. So dialog result here is still going to be no, we don't have any result. We're currently no status. We do have an intent still, so it's still power. Now we're going to launch this dialog. So let's just quickly nip over to the solution. I think I've missed a breakpoint out. Yeah, I didn't. Missed that one. So we're now coming into here. So we're running the first step that was in here, and we're going to get an error because we haven't done anything. So that's fine. So what do we need to know about this? So I think we need to know something about the question that we originally sent in, which would be on the turn. Now you can do that by passing in an additional option here. So I am going to go in and pass in the original intent. So I shall say our top intent. I'm going to pass that in. So in our state, I can now remember that, and what I choose to do is do that in the initialize step. So I am going to say that the step context dot, if I can remember where the options, that's great, yeah. So, and I'm going to say that I expect that to be a string options, and I'm going to set that a little trick here. So if options is not equal null, I'll set it. So what did we call the profile? So user profile accessor set async. Okay, so we're going to take the turn step. The turn context. So we get that from the step context. The current state of the object, so we haven't actually got that yet, so let's go and grab that. So again, the context. Okay, so if we don't have, this is the first time we've asked for state, which in case this is, then I'm going to just return a new nice question state object. So this is an async event, so we need to just add this onto here to allow us to do an await. Oops, that was step context. Dot context. So it gives us the current state, and then this again is awaitable, so we can call await on this. Set async context dot current state. Let's use a cancellation token as well. Pass that in. So what we've done here is we've loaded the state and we're setting the state, but we haven't done anything with the state. So I want to store the intent, so I'm going to say current state dot original intent equals current state equals the options. This isn't defined yet, so we're going to use Visual Studio to help us define that. Now, be careful here, because what Visual Studio will do by default is create this property, but it will create it as internal. Now, state will need to gain access to that, otherwise it won't be able to rehydrate it on the way back, so we must make this public. That's a gotcha that I've fallen for a lot. Okay, so we've now got the state, setting it based on the argument that was passed in, and because this is the first step to run, we then set it so we remember it for later. And that's pretty much it, but you can see this is red, this wants us to come back with the dialog turn. Now in this particular case, this is quite a programmatic step, we're not interfacing with the user at all. So we can just come out of here and then call await step context next. So what we're saying here is we're just going to come into this step and immediately move to the next step. So we've done our bit of work that we wanted to do, initialize it, and then we're going to carry on and go to the next step, whatever that next step is. And in this case, we know what it is because it can come from here to here. Okay, I mean, that needs to be a return. So we come in here, and now we're going to go respond to positive question step. So this is where you might put some additional logic. But what I'm going to do, just to keep this nice and simple, is we're going to say step context dot send a message. Oh, step context send activity. So we're going to send a message back. And we're going to say, because we're in the positive, oh, thanks for asking about, and then we can put in this is state. So we're still going to assume it could be, we're not going to assume it's set, so we still want to get the null back. This is async again. But obviously we're hoping it's going to have the right intent in there. Obviously this isn't, you wouldn't put the intent in there because it's a programmatic thing, but just for this sample. This is also an awaitable call. And again, we're not prompting for anything, so we're just going to send that back. That's the kind of logical step, that logical step, this logical step, and now we're going to send an actual prompt. So again, we use the same trick here. We just move on to the next step. So as you can see, these steps are a way of modularizing your process. So it's quite helpful with that. You can think of it in a kind of simple flowchart of process steps. And now we've come down to the actual prompt, and this is where it gets a little bit more interesting. So we've moved all the way through here, and now we want to prompt the user. So we want to ask the user, do they want to carry on in some fashion? So this is where we need an additional dialog to help us out. So if we come back to our sample, and we look in the greetings dialog, now you see here that they've added some additional dialogues. So another dialog here is called text prompt, and it's validating some stuff, right? That's fine. We'll want something like that. So we're going to add that. And this is where, this is another thing I think has been a little bit overly confused in the samples. So if you just want to create a text prompt, right, all that's happening here is we're creating another dialog, just like we did with the nice questions. And again, it wants an ID. So it's just another dialog. Right? There's nothing special about it. It doesn't have to have a special name. It doesn't have to have a property name. We can just call it ask for text. So that's all this text prompt is going to do. Now, the text prompt is a specially derived dialog, and its purpose is to basically launch another mini dialog that's going to take care of responding, or take care of the response from the user. So we don't have to worry about the nitty-gritty aspects of that. But just to know that this dialog set that we're forming, just like we were forming another dialog set, so we've got a waterfall dialog in a dialog set, and now we've got a prompt in the dialog set. So when we want to invoke it, so let's come back into our samples. Again, I don't want to put things in there that we don't know about. So let's go to the name prompt. It's going to ask here. So let's just take this. Notice it's a return type. So let's come back to our bot. Put the same thing in. Creating new activity, so squiggly lines. Not diagnostics, this is a bot thing. So this is our prompt, so we can say, so we've been, thanks for asking about that. Okay, so do you want to learn more? Or shall I expand on that? again, this is async. Prompts, name prompt. This isn't a name prompt, this is just a generic text. So just say ask for text. These prompt options here, so this is allows us to put this in here. So let's see what happens now. So let's run this dialog up, run this bot up. I haven't got enough breakpoints in here, have I? Anywhere near enough now. So let's just check that, and that. Let's come back into here. Let's restart this conversation so I know exactly where we are. Right, so we need to watch this bit carefully. So we're going to type in hi. So the bot constructor is created again. This is always constructed for every message, remember. But because we've got a dialog set here, there's something that's slightly interesting will happen now. So the nice questions dialog is also being created. And it's been created and we don't even know we're going to use it yet. So from a performance point of view, this is something to bear in mind. So every message, now these two dialogues have been created. So we come in here, we're going to look at our intent again. Let's just assume it's going to get all the way down here. It is, it's going to launch this dialogue. So now it's launched this dialogue. The framework understands there's a waterfall step involved. It understands that the waterfall step, the first step of that needs to be executed. So now we're coming in here. Did we get our options? We did, defense, brilliant. So we can now see if we can get our state. Looks like we have, looks like we're storing the state, saving it. And then we're going to ask to move to the next step. So immediately we go into the next step. We can ask for our state back again. Our state has remembered the defense, so that's good news. We're now going to send something back to the user. Then we're going to move immediately on to the next step. And then we're now prompting, so we're now going to prompt the user. I shall expand on that. So if we look in the bot here, we see this is our message. This was the message from our previous step, and now this is the prompt. So as far as the bot is concerned, we're now waiting for the user to respond to that. So shall I expand on that? You could say, yes, please. Right, so the bot's going to run. Going to create the constructor again. So the dialog context. So this is now null. So what's happened there is we've run out of steps to process. So as far as it's concerned, there is no dialog to run. So we're going to come in here and we're going to look at whatever this intent is for yes please. It's going to be defense again. We're going to come in here and we're just going to launch the start again, and we're just going to go through the same thing. So obviously not particularly useful. So let's remedy that. So what we need now is we're prompted for the next step, and then we need to respond to next question result step async. Generate a new method for that. Now we could use Lewis here again. It's no problem invoking Lewis multiple times, but let's just keep this a little bit more simple. So if we can say if the step context dot result, let's put a little bit of checking in there. So if it's not that and step context oops, if step context dot result. If is oh, hang on. Get my checks in a twist. So if it is prompt right now, if the prompt result, let's just say equals yes, then we can just grab a nice reply and say send activity, thanks, I will. And then what we can do, make it async. Then we can do, and I believe it's the context dot replace dialog, and our dialog ID is whatever our dialog ID is. Nice questions. We're not going to pass in any options this time. So we're going to restart this dialog basically. Oh, and is that a turn context? Yep, cool. Otherwise, we're finished, right? So we can just return. In fact, there's a turn dialog turn result. Oh, no, I thought it was done on that. Turn results. Turn status complete. Okay, so we've finished. We've positively said we're finished rather than just falling out like we did last time. In fact, let's just put a little, just so a little bit nicer. So let's see how we get on now. Let's just restart this conversation so we know where we are. Hi. So it's our constructors. Our messages pop into here. Start our initialization. Do all the state business. Do the prompting. So expand on that, I suppose. So there's a constructor. Constructors are firing. Now then, active dialog is null. That doesn't seem right to me. That's interesting. Why is the active dialog null? That is puzzling me. So let's have a quick nip back into here. Would say that it's because the state hasn't been stored. The state hasn't been stored. The state hasn't been stored. Let's say some state. So let's come back into our bot. So the one important thing about having dialog state as part of the way the framework works is it also means that you've got to save it. Let's try that again. Let's restart again, make sure we've got a nice clean base. You don't have to do this normally, but just because we're trying to prove the state's working, I want to make sure that we've got a clean starting point. So our dialog's created, go here, going to ask the question. Shall I expand on that? Yes, now come on, services. Right, so there's the constructors. Hooray, we have an active dialog state, because what's happened there is now the dialog state has been stored correctly and saved. It's now identified that the turn context that has, if we have a look in turn state, you can see it's got a few connecting, it's got the conversation state in here. It's got some activity information here with some IDs in, some state in there. And what it's doing is it's mapping that to our dialog set. And it's saying, yep, there is currently, I believe, an active dialog. And that active dialog is called Nice Questions. So it's pulling that back. So now when we go in here, we look at the Lewis state. So the Lewis state is for the top intent of yet, for whatever yes is going to mean, because we haven't programmed anything for yes, no type statements, which we could do, but we haven't. So now we're going to do continue. Now, if you remember, like previously, we just leapt straight into here. So what's going to happen now is when we do continue, we now go straight back to our step that's after the prompt. So we're going after the prompt, it's coming here. So we reinstated the Nice Questions dialog, understands what the next step is. We're now into this next step. The result of the next step is now being populated with what the user typed, yes. So if I've written my .NET code properly, we should say thanks, I will. Now let's see whether the replace questions dialog works. It doesn't. A dialog with the ID of nice questions wasn't found, right? So I've fallen for my own trap again. So the ID is incorrect because the dialog we're replacing is in fact the waterfall dialog. So let's start that up again. I could kid you and pretend I'm doing this on purpose to prove a point, but I'll put the wrong one in. So let's have a look back here again, restart the conversation. Start the conversation dialog off. Bots services run again, everything runs again. Start the dialog, go through the dialog, prompt the user. Shall I expand on that? Yes. Again, the constructors will fire again. Back in here again. Yes, we do have a dialog to continue. Now we're going to try and replace the dialog. Seems to work. So now we've replaced the dialog. What's happened here is we got to this step here. We're replacing with a brand new dialog, so it's calling into here. Back to initialize step. But we didn't pass any options, so the options is going to be none this time. So the state is still going to be the same state as it was before, with any luck. So now we're going to come in here. So this is partly why we do initialize state. It helps do this kind of resetting feature. So when we get the current state, the original intent is still defense, so that hasn't changed. And then we can ask the question again. And now eventually it comes back out of here, so the continue dialog has come out of here. We've got responded, so it is true, i.e. the user is still responding to the dialogue, so we don't have to now interrupt that, so we can just pull straight out of that. So I expand on that. No thanks. So we're going to come in here, get the time, we're going to come down to continue dialogue again. It's going to invoke the response. We're now going to say, oh well, and we're going to fall straight out. So now, that's it. So our dialogue's now completely finished. So if I say hello again in here, go through the bot constructors, and now into the on-turn context, the dialogue context is now null, because there is no currently active dialogue. So that is the essence of how dialogue contexts and conversational dialogues work. You can probably see that we can make that a lot bigger and expand on that in all sorts of different ways. You can have dialogues upon dialogues upon dialogues. We've seen a little bit of that with the text prompt. We've seen that in the samples where you get a lot of sort of well-crafted .NET, but not necessarily particularly helpful in explaining how things work. So when we look at the greeting dialogue here, we're using the name prompt. It kind of feels like in the sample that you need to create lots of text prompts to do everything. But I mean, what's really happening here is it's because of the validation. So you can have automatic validation. So on our yes, no, for example, we can add a validation check to make sure that whatever they type in is a yes, no type response, and it won't let you out of that prompt until you have. But a lot of the time, all you really want to do is ask the user just to enter some text and then let the logic of your bot take care of it after that. You don't want to be stuck, continually re-prompting the same question. It doesn't make for a very intelligent conversation, unless you're sort of doing a angry three-year-old bot. So I think we'll leave it there for now. In next episodes, we can look at making a better response from the politician and actually try and give it some sort of personality. So thank you for listening.